The beep was heard around the world, electronics invading Baselworld. The tragic year of '69 marked disasters few survived. The summer of love was held for ransom by battery-powered versions of Manson. Death stained the walls from ceiling to floor the moment Quartz marched through the door. At first, some wrote it off as a failed trend, condemned for trying to play pretend. By the orological community, contempt with mechanized dignity. It wasn't until smoke burst into flames, engulfing a slew of prominent names, brands with history reduced sadly to burnt cinders of iconic residue. Mass-produced wasn't taboo or cheap. It was convenient, feasible, and somewhat chic. Realizing quartz was not just a fad, brands got themselves to marketing rehab. Pillars remained, maintaining foundation. Fine watchmaking continued in trepidation. Eventually, bloom replaced what was nuked, and the industry continued, albeit spooked. In time for the New World Order arrival, the digital revolution up and went viral, birthing a fresh new venomous beast, ugly head reared to pillage and feast. And just like that, the Hydra effect ensued, for every head cut off, replaced by two, trespassing in domains not their own, electronic cookware, fashion, smartphone. These intruders aren't just anyone. Apple, Guess, Samsung, Braun. Some call it innovation and technology, while others perversion and monstrosity. It makes no difference, their purpose or aim, horning in on the watch throne game. Be it as simple as the company bottom line, or noble service teaching Gen Z to tell time. The point is, the initial Armageddon sent 2/3 of the industry to heaven. They do say the sequel is always worse than whatever it is that came first. That is, if part 2 is even in the making, what will be left for all of who's taking? Huh? Thank you.
Woo-hoo. All right. Thanks, Dom. Thanks to you and your team for the fantastic organization. Thanks to the Siddiqui family for this wonderful event and hospitality. Thanks to you for coming. And thanks to our three panelists for joining today. They are gentlemen who are no strangers to the topics of innovation and technology change. Lucien's a nuclear engineer, entrepreneur, and driver of a number of entrepreneurial ventures. Benoit has made watches that include things like an oil-filled dive watch and something we'll talk about a little later, the E-Crown, and so incorporating technology into watches. And for Stephen Forsey, every new watch is a test bed and learning experiment, and so we'll talk about some of those things as well. Okay, so the fact that there's an Apocalypse 2 suggests that some of our heroes have survived Apocalypse 1, and that's a happy thing. Time will tell whether this is a sequel with new villains and entertaining plot twists, or simply a disappointing remake of the original with new actors. And for those of you who either didn't see the first one, or if it was an opera, slept through parts of the second act, here's a quick recap. Late 50s began the development of quartz technology by both the Japanese and the Swiss. December of 1969, the Seiko Astron was introduced, followed in Basel the following year by the Beta 21 by the Swiss. Of course, as we all know, the Japanese went all in, the Swiss did not. And between 1970 and 1983, the number of Swiss watchmaking enterprises went from 1,600 to 600, and the number of people in the business by 1988, even with the advent of the Swatch in 1983, had gone from 90,000 to 28,000. So let's get started. Gentlemen, as you think back on those days, what were the common characteristics of the enterprises that survived, maybe even thrived, and how does that contrast with those who perished in the cataclysm?
Oh, over to me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, and great pleasure to be here again at Dubai Watch Week. You know, I was actually at school through that electronic watch crisis, pretty much. But for me personally, it's when I decided to be a watchmaker. Interestingly, at that time, the UK had extinguished its own industry, you know, the small watch industry it had as well. I guess there was from what I understand, there were a number of things. There was a whole movement of technology. The Swiss industry had not really reinvested over the years, so I think there was quite an antiquated sort of machine park probably, and techniques and things which had been sort of you know, continued through the years. And so that was one thing. They were quite taken by surprise, this rush of technology. But it's a technology which hit not only the Swiss watch industry, it hit engineering. You know, I remember in the UK it was, you know, was also a devastating sort of tsunami of technology and change which came across. So I think from that side, you know, it's not just that electronic watch, but there was a whole movement, and the industry had to revamp itself, as the mechanical watch was no longer just a utility object.
I think there is also, and I think you see it now again, a kind of monoculture of watchmaking. And if you relate it, for example, to agriculture, when you grow the same crops, the same DNA, one bug is enough to get starvation. If you have different types of crops, so different types of watchmaking, if there's one new bug coming in, the digital or the quartz bug coming in, maybe there is some that will survive. And sometimes you see it now also. It's all the same platforms. And the reason is business, of course. It's good money, it's low risk to do the same thing all over again. But yes, you are very vulnerable to external things that you don't see coming.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts?
So, hello everybody. Nice to be here also after 2 years, I guess. So, first of all, thank you for the questions. I don't know what do you smoke to prepare the questions. But I had to, frankly, the questions are very interesting and very pertinent. So, I prepare myself because the questions are a little bit difficult to me. I had to thought a little bit. And the question is, in my view, what did the Swiss survivor have in common? Frankly, my first answer could be Mr. Hayek father and Jean-Paul River. So, I mean, in that aspect, you see, I go to persons and not to technology, because I guess the industry finally is driven by men who have a vision or who have a lack of vision. And the survivor are, in fact, here because some people made the correct decision in the correct moment. The survivor, speaking the survivor of the Swiss watch industry. Mm-hmm. So for Mr. Hayek, I believe that his belief on the Swiss mechanic watches and also his cooperative intelligence is one of the key which really saved the industry And for also another aspect is the way he managed to consolidate an exploded world of small suppliers with huge historical bias into the Swatch Group. And for Mr. Beaver, I think is marketing and human genius, the way he managed to revitalize old or recent glories, and the way he mentored some of the key human resources who afterwards leads different brands has been key. And I pretend that the rest of the survivor, they taken advantage of these global moves, including Rolex or other big names. Because without that strength and that decision, maybe the Swiss industry would have been dead.
So if we look at today's situation.
I forgot something about
yes?
the victim.
The victim, okay.
The people of the heaven who didn't survive, okay? I guess that is lack of global flexibility and lack of open-minding for integration. And that includes, to me, all the crafts required to build a wristwatch, from oscillator escapement to design, art, finances, and IP management intelligence.
So for you, it's a failure or triumph of human leadership and organizational capacity. Yeah, very interesting. Well, today, as we see the new challenges from smartphones and other technology, is the situation similar, different? What do you see?
What? I don't.
I'm sorry, is this like the 70s and the quartz crisis, or different?
It's completely different.
Say more.
Yeah, I don't think there is a risk as we had it in the 70s, because in the 70s, mechanical watchmaking was still striving or targeting towards precision. And quartz came and it was a lot more precise. So suddenly watchmaking had to reinvent itself, what it did through all these processes. So the risk that we have now is a lot lower, also because I believe there is empathy for gears more than for quartz oscillators. And that is what we are all selling. We are selling a kind of empathy for what we are doing. What they do, what we all do, we try to come up with something that you can relate to. Even the non-technical people in this room will have empathy for a mechanical watch, or at least more than for a digital watch or a quartz watch.
So,
if you have to choose which one I'm going to throw away, I think most will take the digital one.
the digital one. So let's ask the question, right? Is the Apple Watch a watch?
No.
No. So why not?
To me. Not to me. No. I mean, I think interesting. As Benoit said, the context is totally different today. But we mustn't be complacent. We can't assume, and we cannot go on thinking that there will never be a crisis or anything like that. We are not vaccinated against that. The watch industry needs to be creative. We need to reach out. We need to engage a new generation, as much for the consumer side as for passing on skills. But the Apple thing is, we're looking at technology. If we go back 15 years ago, 20 years ago, our phones, we had mobile phones, but they were handheld. Trouble was the thing kept falling out of your pocket in the car or wherever you were sitting, so it wasn't very practical to be that size. So what we saw was the technology getting smaller. Now that technology is extraordinary. It's got to the size where the industry needs to keep developing that in terms of tech. So for me, putting it on a strap is to take real estate of the wrist position, but it's a stepping stone, and I would be very surprised if that type of technology exists like that in 10 years' time. The technology must move forward. So why not, have it as a flexible bit of tech that goes in a strap. You know, this is the logical way that technology would go from my feeling and standpoint. So, and I think it's an opportunity. You know, there are many people, a young generation, and perhaps even to our age, who perhaps have never worn a watch, and so getting that bit of technology on the wrist, you get into the habit of that, and perhaps you enjoy that experience in a way, and then that's an opportunity for watchmakers and watch companies to go out there and engage and offer try and get people to come on board and enjoy the wonders of a mechanical watch and share the craftsmanship as you mentioned.
So is the Apple Watch a watch?
Yes, for me it's a watch. Yes.
It is for you.
Yeah,
Why?
because it gives the time. It tells the time.
Weren't
So-
you the guy who just said that the mistake that the industry made in the 70s was that it focused on timekeeping precision and was
Yes,
competing
but
directly?
it does a lot more, and it's a 21st century version of a Casio watch. I think that the Swiss industry should invent a label like I'm Belgian, and in Belgium we have the label Belgian chocolate. Yes, I'm with Swiss here. I'm with Swiss here, but
Hey, easy,
all right,
easy.
guys.
Come on.
I'm creating some confusion. I thought I was in Dubai. It was okay to say this. All right. I see there's a lot of. I think my
You see-
microphone is. They cut my microphone already. The lobby is present everywhere. No, if you could invent a kind of label where you say, this is a real watch. You say real watch or something. I don't know. I'm not a marketeer, but to say this is the real stuff.
Okay. Well, you should come in the morning tomorrow. Edward Milan will be here to talk about Swiss made, I'm sure, among other topics. But maybe Belgian made or the Gronefeld's Dutch made.
Yeah, that's Dutch. Yes.
Is the Apple Watch a watch?
No.
No. Why
It's
not?
a wearable medical device, if I make it short. So my Apple Watch saved my life. Okay, you say, you know the advertising, a guy having an accident, etc. And if you travel in the US currently, okay, first of all, it's a success. Currently, it's a big success. Okay, turnover twice
more.
or third time Rolex,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a success. That's it. Okay, point one. The second one is point is who wear an Apple Watch. I wrote here a provocative sentence. So normally
Careful, I'm gonna cut your phone.
an Apple Watch is made for anxious 40s plus.
Anxious 40s plus.
So,
No. Is out there.
yes, frankly, if you look at who wear, okay, you have some religion, some are Apple, so it's normal they wear. That's another reason. But it's not a question of watch or no watch. But I would say the key success factor could be that it is a very intelligent watch. I mean, it's a sensor, and it is a very it's really related with artificial intelligence. It's connected, etc. So, but to me, the question is excellent because it's a key question. Apple Watch is not a small thing; it's big. And I took some notes. The difference between quartz and I would say the Apple Watch maybe is a factor 100 in capex. I mean, you have in front of you Apple. So you speak about Switzerland, but you have a group with a cash power like the GNP from Austria 1 year. So 550 billion in cash. So that's the reality. So for them, and that's the power they have to develop these kind of things. So, but it is a watch, to me, no. And I agree with you, because of the development of the technology, it is possible that in 10 years, 20 years, the question of using the wrist to have sensors will be a waste of space. I mean, these sensors don't need to be here. They could be directly maybe in the brain or under the skin, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little bit sad to use a very specific place where you can express your personality, et cetera, to have technological sensors.
So you
So my answer is, to me, no is not a watch.
no, and
In the sense of a Swiss or Belgian, no, a Swiss watch.
no. So for you and for you, right? I hear you agreeing with Stephen that it's not a watch, and also that Moore's law works, right, and continues to work, and you can make electronic devices smaller and smaller with more and more power over time. And you know, as it turned out in the 1920s and 30s, that the best place to have your watch was not in your pocket, right? You could miniaturize it and put it on your wrist. That there's no reason over time to waste that real estate with sensors and transmitting devices and screens maybe that are in your ear, eye, under your skin, and that it may be that the traditional timekeeping piece and this electronic connected device actually diverge further rather than converging.
Those, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a nice way to see it. Yeah.
Do you agree with it, or am I just
Yes,
telling a tale?
I believe it's a good one.
The other point is we are also active in the medical technologies, especially microinjectors, etc. And maybe a point will open or close really the door of using a watch as medical, I mean as life-saving information keeping device, let's say that way, is the regulatory. So currently the boundary is relatively clear. So the watch communicate information, but they are not binding in the legal and American legal sense. It's informed. Okay. When the information captured or informed will be, I would say, accurate enough to be considered as medical, it will be a new chapter for the use of wrist, but I guess the wrist is not the best place.
I see. Okay, so if we kind of take where we are so far and say, okay, we kind of more or less seem to agree with some dispute. Still, technology plays a role in watches, and the use of technology is changing. Maybe we'll start with you and your nano project, and just talk a little bit about the incorporation of new technologies, not necessarily information technology per se, into mechanical timekeepers.
Well, I mean, thank you, Gary. The Renaissance, the rising of watchmaking from the ashes of the electronic watch crisis has been largely thanks to information technology, because now we can design in 3 dimensions, we can simulate, we can machine components with CNC technology, which has given us precision and flexibility, which we didn't have with the methods of the 20th century. So that's one important aspect there, where we're all very glad, I think, to have that technology. But it's not the only part of the story, and that's where with Robert and our team we've been looking at the 2 constraints for the mechanical watch, the space and the energy, and how we use those. That's where our mechanical nano project is not about just making a smaller watch, because there have been small movements which have been made very well, but it's more about maximizing that energy use and how we do it in the space. So, it's a different approach. And I think that's one of the things. We've got a very wide sphere, different companies. Lucien's team are working with really extraordinary technology to create interesting, fascinating pieces. You know, Benoit is he's put the liquid inside. You know, we try to keep it out, but you know, so these are all aspects where we're harnessing technology in different ways, aren't we? And so, you know, for us, we're very optimistic that there's, as long as we've got questions which we can ask ourselves and we don't have the answers yet, then there's plenty of things left to develop.
So you've spoken to certainly the use of information technology in the process of watch creation and manufacturing, and then other kinds of technology in the watch. For me, the E-Crown is a really interesting example of the integration of electronic technology, I guess in my view anyway, for the purpose of making the mechanical watch a better timekeeper and solving some pain points for the wearer and user. So maybe for our audience here, you just describe that very briefly and talk about it a little bit.
All right, so we call it E-Crown. That's the name of the technology we developed. Stands for electronic crown. So we don't touch the integrity, the mechanical integrity of the watch is unharmed. We only concentrated on automating what you usually do with the crown, meaning setting and winding. So the Type 2, that's the watch we integrated this technology in, is a watch you never have to set and you never have to wind, because E-Crown does it for you. It has different time zones. It stops the watch, the mechanical watch, when you don't wear it. So you don't have to wind it because it's an automatic watch. So the power reserve stays inside the watch. Generally speaking, to explain the way we think and we approach this, it's a bit like the car industry did it in the 80s, before the 80s, not in Dubai, but in Europe when it was raining. You weren't so sure your car was going to start because there were no electronic inside the car. Now you don't ask yourself that question anymore, thanks to electronics. Thanks to electronics, your car is a better car. It drives better, less consumption, etc. You still have the sound, you still have the acceleration, you still have the experience of that car, but you also have the trust. And so you add a dimension, and that's where E-Crown comes in. It's this relation, this better, improved relation to the product. I believe that on the long run, if you can make a product better, meaning thinking of the user, what he needs, and how you can address different aspects, ergonomical in a general term, in a general sense, you end up with a better product, a more adapted product to the user.
Yeah. And then you know, with HYT and its liquid display of time, its application of actually fairly difficult technology, I think, to keep for many, many years, right, a liquid contained when you know, it wants to escape, but to create a visual delight and experience for the user. Do you think that the role of technology in watches in the future is more about enhancing the relationship with the watch, making the watch more usable, making it more enjoyable for the user?
First of all, I like your commentary.
Thank you.
And your idea is very good, frankly. About our technologies, I have to say I'm not anymore very involved in the operations. I have a couple of other companies working in a lot of other fields, but about the technology inside of the watch, especially new technologies. So as far as they can support creativity and, I would say, art, about function is maybe another question.
Okay.
But as far as support really I would say the soul of the watch making reality, it could be helpful if it goes in the direction of utility. I'm not sure that it will really help the industry. I give an example to make a comparison. The precision of an atomic watch is 1 second about 160 million year deviation. So simply to have that in mind. 1 second, 160 million year. So it's simply impossible to go in that, it's physically non-possible to go in that direction. So intending to be precise as an atomic watch, for instance,
Makes no sense.
it makes no sense, okay?
No.
Now, for instance, working on nanotechnologies, I put that as a good example, is the Venta, do you know one moment, that's black, absolute black.
Vanta Black, yeah.
Venta Blanc, for instance. Or some work in, I don't know, in the sapphire in order to create special effect, etc., which will animate and the watch, I guess it is helpful. Or, like you say, for the development. But we have to take care. If it is too automated, if no more handcraft are used in order to produce a piece of art which we consider as a watch, the soul of the piece will go out. It's a danger to me.
Yeah. So I think you speak compellingly about art and soul. Can any of you envision that at some point artificial intelligence will get to be so good and learn so quickly that it will make the job of the watch designer less important or obsolete?
Well, I mean,
Sorry, go.
Oh, no,
Please. Artificial intelligence will be the last creation of mankind, they say. After that, machines will take over.
So you're thinking maybe so.
And if you're talking about Apocalypse 2, I think that's the one.
That's the one. So it's not that the smartwatch
I don't
displaces
think
the
so, no.
mechanical watch, it's
No.
that the robots take over.
I think Google is the roots, like from a tree, sucking big data out of the internet, feeding artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We go there. This is the way we are moving. Artificial intelligence is big data management, basically. How do you cope with all this information, and how do you make something out of it
Right.
with an algorithm?
So there's the can machines get smart enough to be creative? And then the second one is this issue of connectedness, where data is flowing from you somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
of course. I mean, well, to me, artificial intelligence it's a term that's been coined up by the tech industry, which is about as appropriate as the Apple Watch, the word "watch" with Apple. I mean, intelligence is what we have. It's what sets human beings apart from animals, from insects, because we have this capacity as a human being to imagine something which doesn't exist and create something completely new and different. So if you think artificial intelligence, it's a misnomer, but it's a label which has been brought up and dreamt up by a very strong tech industry to give us the idea that we can completely rely on this stuff. But it's what it is exactly what Benoit said. It's about gathering enough data of enough different scenarios to try and anticipate the outcome of something. But from there, it's only at the moment, I mean, and as you say, I quite agree, that if one day we manage to create some sort of artificial device which can actually replicate what we do as human beings, then we're done, that is definitely true. But until then, I think I hope in a lot of ways that we're a long way away from that, because all of our creativity, we need time, we need experience, and we need to be able to have a certain freedom to be creative in all different ways. You know, each person is an individual, and so we need that platform and that possibility to have original thought, to think differently to the other person, and so on. So, you know, if it's all being captured by Google or by some tech company, and then, you know, there's nothing left for us to do, really.
So, yeah.
And thus endeth, no.
That's it.
You don't need to speak, hein, Lucien?
And yet.
You don't have to.
No, but again, it's very interesting. The question is, you spoke about big data. We know all here in the industry the use of relatively, it's not really big data, but data, a kind of artificial intelligence, I would say marketing intelligence. I don't know, you use maybe tools like Zoho or platforms in order to score all the question of social media, etc., to know better your customer, to address better what they want, etc. But now, artificial intelligence will be fed by information, and after that has to maybe create, innovate, and after that replicate or give some output. And I put, so I have a dream. So my friend Google, or Apple, huh? I have no religion, sorry for that. So my friend Google or Apple know me so well, my wallet and me, my portemonnaie and me, they would invent, design, manufacture in 3D printing, gold or plastic or what do you want, diamond, the watch to which I dreamed last night, the one that best expresses my uniqueness, my personality, because they know me extremely well. So my brain was naturally connected directly to these great friends, not through watches, interfaces. I spoke, there are work in your part of the world about that. Connection directly,
yes.
Okay? No need to anything on keyboard, etc. And my dream watch is manufactured this night, delivered by an Amazon drone when I wake up with my breakfast. Okay, so will I like it?
That's a great question.
It's a good question. So, and yeah, that's a true question. So I imagine, I dream, and tomorrow morning on my breakfast, you have your new Gröbel Force 3D printed
For €5.
flying to you. Let's go to the end of the thought. So now, certain trends of the new sustainable economy. So there are some person thinking about thinking the economy in other ways. There is a lot of university thinking of that, etc. They say that the human being is not only greedy. So the base of our current capitalistic economy is that the human being is greedy.
Greedy.
Greedy. Okay. So, but some things, some thought, it is not. So, the human being is also sociable.
Socially.
Sociable.
Yeah, social.
He likes to discover the other. And it is also a collaborative being. So not just being in front of your own mirror is a pleasure, but it could be a real pleasure to discover the creation of others. Okay. So if this is true, then the watchmaking profession still has a future.
And so in this world that we're talking about, does the role of the creator, the constructor, the designer diminish, go away? I mean, I guess I mean, I think of the great independents, and Max is sitting here and is creating pieces with the help of others that communicate a personal vision. Does that diminish or go away? Where to the point at which it's delivered by a drone, or it comes out of a vending machine and it's made for you specifically on the spot. Does the idea of the mechanical wristwatch as a physical embodiment of its creator's vision, and that person isn't the individual user, does that go away?
Well, potentially, yeah. I mean, I was just thinking about it actually. The moment that this artificial intelligence sort of ogre manifests itself, there will only need to be one, because it will be able to create everything. So we can all go on vacation then. But until then, I think we've still got a fair amount cut out for us, and I think we're a fair distance from the although targeted advertising, it does seem to be quite clever. I mean, my phone keeps coming up with things that I had a conversation with somebody about, and which I find annoying, because what I'd like is I don't know for all of us, but when I search on an internet search, I want stuff that I don't know. I don't want to keep coming up with stuff that I do know. And this sort of targeted approach of trying to gather this data about me to kind of channel me, I find a bit annoying, really. So I tend to sort of push that away, but that's maybe my personal standpoint. But it's an interesting thing. If you go back 200 years, if you wanted your likeness, you had to get a portrait painter to paint that. And then if you go from the 1840s, we discovered photography with silver nitrate film, and logically, that would have eliminated painting completely, because you could reproduce everything, but it didn't. And so then if you come forward to the 90s, 2000s now, and our fantastic digital photography, that we're all expert photographers suddenly, this logically should have completely eliminated painting and silver nitrate photography. But if you talk to to a photographer who's really passionate, when they want a really superb photo, they will prepare it all with the digital stuff, and then they will shoot proper film, because you don't have that pixelization of things which we get with technology. So so I think the logic is there, and there are examples that give courage and hope to us to be able to continue creating for a good while to come.
Do you see the whole idea that the mechanical watch is unconnected? Is that a future virtue that people say, well, I don't like being on the grid, my wallet and my heart being uploaded 24 hours a day. Thank goodness for this old ticking thing that I happen to have on my wrist.
Yeah, sure. Of course. I think it's there is always, it's like Steven says, there is room for different things in this world. We are panicked because there is a new technology coming, but don't worry, after a while it goes down again, and you end up with there will be a new one that comes up, and then a new one that comes up, and every time but it's just, it fades away again. Mm-hmm. You keep a part of it, and then the rest goes away, and you keep like painting and things, it stays. And yeah, for sure. That's the nice thing about watchmaking. There is a watch for everyone.
Well, to that point, all three of you are involved with watchmaking enterprises that are luxury items, right? Fairly high-end, beautifully crafted, expensive. Is the threat to valuable? What did I say? Oh, expensive. So, oh dear.
Use that E word.
Oh,
Goodness.
I'll stand in the corner later, but and you can tell me when it's time.
I'll
to
see
come
you
out.
outside, Gary.
Okay, yes, yes sir. So extremely valuable timepieces. For those operating at a still valuable value proposition but a lower price point, is the threat bigger for them than for the highly differentiated high-end watches?
We don't, the watch industry is not selling watches or time precision or something like that. So there is, it's not a, we're not talking about, for most watches, we don't talk about timekeeping. We talk about feeling good. You feel good about it.
And so you
sell high heels.
yeah.
You know, it's for men.
I think it's a very personal thing. You know, we very fortunate to meet a lot of collectors, and quite a few people. I've had a few people these last couple of days who wanted to talk about precision, wanted to talk about timekeeping of their mechanical watches, and so it's. I think again, it's such a wide, broad palette that we've got there. You know. Yep. That, as you said, you know, there's a watch for everybody, I think, you know.
Yeah, I would say, as long as the watch remain a piece of art, I guess there is no threat about the life or the survive of that industry. For different reasons, but one reason is, and I'm very sorry to be such cold saying that, but maybe the best, I would say, friend we have for that is our private banker. Because the private banker will give you the advice for a small part of your asset to go into art. And a portion of art are high-end watches. On the other hand, the other friends are Christie's or Sotheby's, which set really the value of these piece of art. And the third allié, the third friend, is the second-hand market, which make the value even stronger. So if the industry can claim, I'm working in a field where I create a reliable value, I would say the threat about the future is lower. As example, we still evaluate some statues from the Greeks today, or some painting from Mona Lisa, etc., from hundreds of years. And mechanical watches will last about a long, long, long time. It's another aspect, not so artistic, but basically that support the artistic expression we enjoy to do and to wear.
All right. Well, our formal time has come to a close. Maybe after we have some questions from our audience, we'll come back. I'll ask you for one final word of advice for the industry, but let's take some questions.
Hello. Now, very interesting conversation, but one element that I think has been crucial to the survival of the mechanical watch was only slightly mentioned by Lucien, and that's marketing. I know it's a dirty word to a lot of watch lovers in the room, but marketing, I think, is very important. And I'd like to ask the two brand owners to which extent you think marketing is responsible, in part, for the continued appeal to the mechanical watch, and to what extent both your brands, and this is true of Max up there as well, I think, are feasting on the carcass left behind by Rolex and Omega. Because most people who own one of your watches already have a Rolex or an Omega or a Patek, which are heavily marketed. And haven't they already convinced people to love mechanical watches, and then they come to yours?
Yeah, sure. The expression of the carcass, I use it very often. I really, yes, because if these larger corporations would not pump as much money in marketing, it would, of course, generate less envie, say that?
Desire.
Desire to watch watches, and mechanical watches in particular. So yes, I'm the little ant that comes after the wolves, the lions, the rats. Then that's me, and then after me comes bacteria. But yes, this lion has to kill the prey first because I can't run after it. I'm too small. So
Yeah.
no, thank you, big brands, for doing that.
Hi. Usually, all the industries worldwide, they thrive on innovation. Innovation is very important. They have a big budget allocated for that. But don't you think the nature of the watchmaking craft itself limits innovation? Because we are supposed to innovate, but we have to, at the same time, stay true to tradition. There is a fine line you have to manage all the time. The more romantic that you are to the traditional watchmaking, there are certain people who like it, but how long can you stay romantic? How do you get out of it and then innovate further? There are brands which do that. There are brands which has rearranged the wheels aesthetically to make it look nice. There are brands which have rearranged it without looking at the aesthetics, and barely anyone has actually looked at changing the whole wheel on how a watch functions. So do you think we are trapped in this, and how do we manage it?
Well, yeah, there is an invisible line, I think, between traditional watchmaking and perhaps a tech side of things, looking at this risk technology sort of side. And you know, there is this element of, do you go with a new technology or not? And I think each one attacks that differently. You know, all of the different brands. So from our standpoint of what we do, we're happy to embrace a new technology if it can really bring us a significant plus, but not forgetting that we have, with watchmaking, you know, we have several hundred years of experience and our own sort of big data of how things work and what works well. And so to improve upon that, you know, you have to look at tribology, friction, and, you know, wear and tear, and even servicing. Consider that when you've got some exotic new materials, if you're going to use them in the movement, can it be serviced reasonably easily? You know, all of these things we have to try and weigh up and steer. I think each one steers their path, you know. Benoit's looking at something with an element of, you know, with bringing some technology in. So navigating a fine line, but it's all about how you explain it, and that comes back, I guess, to what Michael said about marketing. You know, it's telling a story. I mean, we don't market as such, although we tell a story and we recount what there is, but it's a journey. So we're navigating that line, I guess.
Yes, frankly, to me, the question is about true innovation. What can be designed as innovation? And there is a lot of innovation, but for instance, what we've done is to bring a new phase of the material inside of the watch industry, which is the liquid, which is unstable, etc. And the vision being not only using that in HYT watches, but we are proposing other expression in other brands, etc. So, and not only for watches, for jewels, for wearable accessories, etc. The cost of that is huge in comparison with the normal cost. So for a small, we speak about, in our case, 50 million. Is not a couple of hundred francs or dollars. And the question is, in our case, making that innovation only for a watch was impossible. So we worked, in fact, not only for the watch industry, but also for the medical technologies industry. So that way we have been able to justify these kind of capex. And after that, okay, the declination, if all the things run, afterwards, okay, is, I would say, use of a base, but the cost of through breakthrough is very high. That's my small experience.
We recognize, I guess, that watches will survive. The premise of mechanical watches. Mechanical watches will survive. The question I have is, how many survivors will be left at the end in 5, 10 years? Connected watches get cheaper, they have more functions. The watch now is just a piece of art and tells time. But when you have medical devices on your wrist, what will the mechanical watch, how many survivors will there be? How many manufacturers of mechanical watches will there be in 10 years' time? I think that's one of the other premises of the question for the debate here. What are your opinions on that?
I think it's going to expand. It's not going to reduce. There's the internet now. Look at what's happening. There are so many new brands created. It's for Ressence. Without the internet, we would not exist. And it's okay. We make a bit more complicated watches, but you have, like Steven said, every week there's a new brand popping up somewhere. And so yes, I believe, and some will survive, yes, because they thought a bit further than just making a new color. But I think it's gonna expand.
Yes, but maybe the threat will be the voice effect. I mean, each day you have a new brand, or each week, etc. But the lifetime, the survival period of these new brands, maybe is as long as the ego of the person launching the brand is able to last.
Yeah.
So,
but it's survival of the fittest. It's very
my point is, it's about art. Frankly, maybe the size has to be corrected, the critical size. Maybe the through will be producing 30 watches a year, or 200, not 5,000. So maybe to give a precise antwort, and you antwort. Sorry, I speak German. So answer to your question is maybe the small, which have a true soul, identity, plus some big as umbrella, and that will be the industry. But not, I guess the threat about the Apple Watch is bigger for Apple, because it's about utility, and the technology changed very rapidly. And I would, although they have a huge success, in 10 years, I will not be extremely surprised that the Apple Watch, as we know it currently, will be interesting to expose in a museum or 20 years. Could be. Do you know? Okay, here is good for a watch, but you can use the
nail.
Les ongles.
Nail.
The nail to capture the lot of information. The nail. Okay? The hair, etc., etc. You don't need a watch. And after that, to get the information is really a small display like that for anxious 40 plus without lens. Really the ideal way to look at information? I don't know.
The mainspring was invented, I think, 600 years ago. The balance wheel, I think, 350 years ago, and we're still using them today. So what can be the next mechanical invention that can last for the next few hundred centuries? And I still don't know what it can be.
It's a good question. I mean, is the magic of the mechanical watch the fact that there's all these gears, and that's what we like, and that's what we enjoy. And at the end of it, you have the escapement, and there are many hundreds of types of escapement to regulate that energy and to maintain the system. But so is it going to be a balanced wheel and spring? Well, there are different research projects which have tried to overturn that.
The Swiss escapement?
Yeah, and then the Swiss escapement, is it has a bunch of sort of basic faults in it, but it's robust and gives an excellent performance, but there are other ones which work well. So I think it's still open out there, and in terms of the mainspring, again, it's an extraordinary thing. In principle, it's just a blade of metal which is coiled up, but how to store that energy? It's a very good question. How you can do that?
I believe it's also relating to the fact that you can have a relation, an empathy with that system. If you come up with a new technology, whatever, there is like Zenit did it. It
exactly.
shakes,
Yeah.
but you don't understand it anymore. And tick 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 tick. It's something you can. You can. Yeah. It's close to you, and that's I think what we like about it. So if you come up with new technologies, quartz, you don't get it, huh? So I think it's what we are selling is empathy.
Okay, last question.
So
1 minute
just-
to go. Oh,
Sorry, just very quickly, I thought Lucien's point was really interesting about how successful Apple has been. I mean, the Apple Watch is kind of a done deal at this point. Introduced in 2015, and they're selling, 30 million plus units per year. We're now in Series 5. So it's a huge commercial success. But if you look at the figures, it hasn't done anything whatsoever to damage exports of more expensive watches from Switzerland. Once you go above about 3,000 Swiss in export units, we're actually seeing growth rather than reduction. And in the U.S. market, the only segment that looks like it might be being hurt by the Apple Watch are watches that are quartz watches, quartz fashion watches that are priced relatively comparably with the Apple Watch. So given the fact that the data seems to show after 4 years plus that the Apple Watch is not, people aren't cross-shopping Apple Watch with Greubel Forsey or Ressence or HYT. They're cross-shopping with, things that are of, roughly comparable value, and they might be saying to themselves, okay, I get a tremendous amount of utility out of an Apple Watch. I don't get it out of a, $300 or $400 Fossil, for instance. That seems to be where the issue might be, but it doesn't really seem as if it's affecting
I think
fine watchmaking at all.
I think it's the problem that we all face in this business is that you have to make the step towards in your life towards putting something on your wrist. And the problem that we have today is that younger generations, they first have a phone or a smartphone before they have a watch. And so then comes it's not a point anymore to have a watch. But if you have an Apple Watch, they will wear that one. And they will get used to have something on their wrist that tells them a certain information. And it feels like being not dressed at a certain point. If you're used to wear a watch, when you have no watch, you feel a bit naked. And I think the Apple Watch is an advantage for all of us in this industry. We should see it also as an advantage so that people start to wear something on their wrist. Maybe after a year they will get fed up with the shaking all the time. But I think for us it's a Trojan horse so that we afterwards can come with maybe other propositions on that same wrist.
May I add something about that point?
Gateway
but I guess
drug.
we are, yeah. Only one point. It's interesting what you say, because I spoke with Gregory Dour, the CEO of HYT, exactly about that point. He has a daughter. She's 13. And the question is, he asked me the question, if his daughter would ask for a watch as a gift, you know, for I don't know, his birthday or and the answer is no. You see, the young generation don't wear nothing. No, basically they don't. They have, but all have that. Okay. Now, what I have some friends which are so wealthy persons, wealthy family, and some of the fathers offer their young children or teenagers valuable watches. And it's a question of size of the market. Sorry for speaking of market, but it is, there is a young so teenagers wearing wearable watches exist. That's true. Yeah. You will not see them, we are not speaking about mass market, but they exist. And the question is, back to your point, is a question of fine-tuning the size of what we are doing. And if it is a fit between the size of the market and our creativity, the industry will last and be successful.
Yeah, I think just quickly, that there is a certain danger, of course, you know, with, as was mentioned, whatever 30 million Apple Watches is a huge number, and of course that's a lot of wrists that haven't got mechanical watches on at the moment, unless you put it on the other wrist, whatever. But there is a bit of a danger to that, to a segment of the industry which in terms of budget is competing for that, because people with modest resource who go for an Apple Watch probably don't have then the budget to buy a mechanical watch, perhaps. So there is a certain danger there, and that's where we need to all be creative and attentive about that. But you've got at the encouraging end, you've got the Swatch System 51, which is an amazing thing for $200, I think, something like that, mechanical watch. So, you know, and we do need that, because we need that volume of industry, and we need accessible watches for people to discover the nice experience of having a watch. But it's also, as Lucien mentioned, that it's something you give a gift. You know, if you give a gift of a technology, you know, of wrist technology, it's going to last 2 years, maybe 5 years. But if you give a mechanical watch, it's going to last for decades. And so it's a different experience. It becomes part of an adventure with you.
All right, well, thanks to everyone. I know there are other people with questions, but maybe come down after. Thanks to everyone.